Welcome to Use Your Items, a video game podcast on the philosophy and design of games. My name is Jason Weiss, and with me today, as always, is my ever-stalwart companion on this treacherous climb up Celeste Mountain, Francisco Martin. Fran, how are you doing today?
Oh boy, this is it. This is it, Francisco. Just breathe. You can do this. How are you doing, Jason?
I'm doing great. It's been a bit of a crazy week, but I'm happy to be sitting here recording with you. And I'm especially excited to talk to you about Celeste, which is our game of discussion today. Before we get into that, I do want to take care of a little bit of housekeeping at the top here. If you are a new listener, thank you so much for joining us. I truly appreciate it. It means the world to us that you're here listening to us chat about video games and why we love them. We do have a Discord, and I want to let you know that right now. That is the best way to get in touch with us. We invite you, implore you, and dare say, I beg you to join us on our Discord. We don't have any other socials for the show right now. You can find us on Twitch sometimes at twitch.tv/useyouritems. Fran also streams for the podcast on his Twitch channel, twitch.tv/L_Frantastico. And Discord's the best way to reach out to us. We're going to start holding some questions and some polls on there for future topics as well. So I would greatly appreciate it. If you want to support the show, or if you like what you're about to hear, come find us on Discord. We'd love to see you.
Link in the show notes.
Yes, link in the show notes. In addition, I just also would like to reiterate, because I feel like we don't mention it too often, but the impetus for Use Your Items and the reason why we do the show came from a 2023, I guess, blog topic that I held on the same named blog, useyouritems.substack.com. And the topic was basically games that we play and why they matter to you, where I asked a number of my close friends and family and loved ones what games impacted them the most in their life, what they feel is so important to them personally, and should I play it? And so we have a list. It's on my backlogged. I will link that in the show notes as well. And there's about 25 games on there or so. And during the course of 2023, Fran and I became very close friends, and we started to discuss these in person. And we said, like many men in their 30s, we should make a podcast about this. So here we are. We are making
another podcast.
One more podcast. One more. We are fast approaching our 10th episode. I believe this might actually be our 10th recorded episode, but don't keep track. I don't know what order I post them in. And we're just excited to be here, and we're excited to have you here with us. So let's dive right into it. Fran, have you played Celeste before? What'd you know about Celeste before this podcast, before today?
So yeah, I actually did play it. I played it around. I had to look up on Steam my achievements, make sure, hey, when did I actually play this? Apparently I played it during the pandemic. So 4 years ago, okay. Give or take, to date this recording. I am a huge fan of platformers. I've played a lot of Mario 64, Hat in Time, if you want to go more 2D, Rayman, Ninja Gaiden, the game that will not be named until later. But so my personal history was that I really, the first time I finished it, I really enjoyed playing it. But I didn't feel like it was that groundbreaking. I would say that the first time I played it, I think that I was so inundated with having played so many 2D platformers back to back that it kind of melded and kind of like blurred into the background, into the diaspora that I was watching of games that I was playing, rather than like be a really pop out experience. I was so focused on the gameplay and playing the game, because at that point in time I was such a mechanics first and like playing these platformers that were very tight controls for its mechanics, that I didn't really focus on the story that much. I did see the cutscenes. I did feel like the story was, this is a nice story, but I never felt during that playthrough that the gameplay and story really cohesively tied to one another. My opinions, though, have definitely changed on that. But before we get into that, what was your history?
So I played Maddie Thorson's. I don't know if it's their first game, but it's the first game of hers that I ever played was Tower Fall
Mm-hmm.
on PS4, and I think probably to this that game should probably just be ported forward onto every console ever made, and Maddie Thorson deserves millions of dollars for ever making it, and it should be just permanently on every console ever made. It's incredible. It's the most fun party game ever. It's like part platformer, part shooter. I implore you to check it out. So I was familiar with Maddie's productions in Towerfall, and then she made Celeste. And my roommate at the time, it was oh boy, maybe 2018 ish. I was living in New York at the time, and my roommate, my best friend Brian, shout out Brian, played through the game and on Switch, I believe, and I watched him play through it on Switch, and it was that was really my first experience with it. I wouldn't say that I paid super close attention to it. I feel like I recall way more of Brian bashing his head against the B and C sides of that game.
He actually played those. Okay,
I believe
interesting.
he completed all of them. I believe I was. If
Wow.
I and Brian, you can yell at me later. I'm almost positive I was in the room when he finished the last C side of the game, which is notorious for having, I think, a minute or longer sequence of not being able to touch the ground. Of
And just for our listeners, B sides and C sides are essentially harder versions of the level. They are not required for the main game, but it is a lot of people really like the B sides and C sides of Celeste.
It's like a well, I think they call them in the text of the game remixes. It's like a remix of a
Mm.
song. It's a remix of a level. So that was my original exposure to Celeste. Was watching Brian play through it, and he was absolutely obsessed in the best way possible. And I thought it was really cool. And I was like, okay, I've played precision platformers before. I really like them usually, but I also feel like I don't really need to play this. I'm happy watching you play it. So that was kind of where it sat in my catalog for a long time. I ended up picking it up on Switch when I bought a Switch in 2019, and I never played it. And I just kind of stared at it on my Switch until this podcast, until this episode. And I am so ecstatic that I did. I just had I had such an enjoyable time playing it. I played half of it on an airplane to London a few weeks ago. So
Mm.
on the flight there, I couldn't fall asleep, which is tragic if you've ever done a transatlantic flight going in that direction. And yeah, playing through the first, I think I got through the first 6 levels or so, maybe 5 levels of the game on the plane, and it was great. I like had trouble putting it down. I kept saying, "Oh, I'm gonna put it down after this and do something else," and it was one more level, it was one more level. So
It
it
does have that quality to it of catching you. I actually, so this playthrough, I decided, since I had already played the main game, I guess I'd never mentioned this. I didn't mention it in my personal history. I never played the B side. I never played the post game content. My
hmm
first playthrough, I just did the main story and I put it down because I was like, yeah, I don't really feel like getting really good at this game. So this playthrough, I actually skipped the main story and went straight into the B sides and
nice.
the epilogue and most of farewell. So
Okay.
more on that later.
Cool. Absolutely. No, I think that's a really great way to approach it because I actually didn't I did not complete beyond the core, which is the very end of the game, and
Mm.
I tried a B side, and like your original playthrough, I was like, this is cool. I kind of know what this is about, and I'm not there right now, and I don't want to take my frustration at bashing my head against the B side into the recording. But they're super cool, and I think it's really cool because as I understand it, looks like some of the B sides are remixed by other people on the team or by people other than Maddie.
Yes. Because as we'll learn later on, Maddie really has a very interesting philosophy for developing this game. But Without any further ado, do you want to get into Behind the Box?
Yes, I do. I think it's your turn for behind the box actually.
Oh boy, then I'll do it. Okay, set the scene. You are at the base of the mountain. You hear birds cawing and the wind blowing, and you hear this beautiful narration. Help Madeline survive her inner demons on her journey to the top of Celeste Mountain in this super tight, handcrafted platformer from the creators of multiplayer classic Towerfall. A narrative driven, single player adventure like Mom used to make, with a charming cast of characters and a touching story of self discovery. A massive mountain teeming with over 700 screens of hardcore platforming challenges and devious secrets. Brutal B-side chapters to unlock, built for only the bravest mountaineers. IGF Excellence in Audio finalists with over 2 hours of original music led by dazzling live piano and catchy synth beats. And finally, Pi. The controls are simple and accessible, simply jump, air dash, and climb, but with layers of expressive depth to master, where every death is a lesson. Lightning fast respawns keep you climbing as you uncover the mysteries of the mountain and brave its many perils. This is it, Madeline. Just breathe. You can do this.
That's awesome. I love that behind the box.
It's very charming, and at the same time, like, it gives you the idea of the mechanics. Like, hey, we're just gonna tell you this is gonna be a very, very arduous like play. Like, it's gonna be difficult, but there's gonna be a lot of charm. Like, the fact that one of the bullet points is just pie by itself
Really cute.
is a very cute, very charming. I guess I keep saying that word, but very charming.
Yeah, absolutely. It totally is. That'll bring us right into the game itself and its design. It is a 2D platformer with classic 16-bit graphics with a focus on player intent rather than player technical skill, featuring core mechanics of dashing, wall climbing, and coyote time. Or just like in Wile E. Coyote and the Roadrunner cartoons, the player's allowed to jump after running off a ledge for some time if you walk off of a ledge.
A lot of games, I don't know if Celeste was not the first one to do this, but a lot of games have started incorporating Coyote time more and more. I know that the last project that I was working on before this project, Coyote time was a huge conversation, and we really wanted it in our game. And it wasn't even a 2D platform; it was a third-person shooter. So
Right.
so it's a very hip mechanic, I guess, so to speak.
What do you think the value of adding something like that is into a platforming experience or from a design perspective?
So a big thing about it is that there is this huge thing in design sometimes called player intent, in which we already mentioned that this game focuses on that player intent rather than technical skill. And that focus essentially becomes the question of how do we guess, or how do we make the game take certain controls from the player to make the game more accessible for them, to make the game not as grueling. So if you accidentally wall off, for example, for Coyote time, you slide off a cliff or anything like that, and you press the jump button and the character jumps. Well, it's removing a little bit of control from you in that you don't have gravity affecting you as strongly as it could be. However, it does play more towards what the player is wanting to do. And for the most part, it really helps with reducing the, oh, come on, like I was just trying to do X.
Right.
It happens all the time. However, at the same time, it is a double-edged sword, right? Every time with games, specifically, there's many variables that can affect how a designer can effectively determine player intent, right? Number of mechanics. The more levers a game has, the more difficult it is to intuit what the player actually wants. If there's way too little mechanics, players can distrust the systems that take automatic control away from them, because if it happens too little, then they will just have kind of like the saving conundrum of, oh, did the game autosave? I'm not sure. I'm still gonna manually save just in case. There's like, I don't really trust these systems. So if you don't have that many mechanics, or it's not really obvious, then the player might just distrust and just manually do it themselves. If there's way too many mechanics, player might get really frustrated with the loss of control, right? Like there's a lot of opportunity for you to say, I want to do X, but the game is forcing me to do Y. Like I'm trying to do something and it's not allowing me because it thinks it knows more than what I want, because it is very difficult to guess what the player wants in the future, especially with more complicated games. Another variable is situation probability. So how often a scenario happens. So if a situation happens 90% of the time, but the parameters vary wildly, then player intention can be very difficult to guess. For example, a game that we like to play, Magic Arena, has an auto pass feature, right? But in Arena, it's and not Arena, on Magic, sometimes it's very important to bluff, right? And not pass your turn immediately and do these things. So, but those are very contextual based that the game just can't do for you. So sometimes it is better to just click, I want to control this myself, rather than let the player intent of the game guess your player intent. And lastly, goal complexity, or not lastly, just three big ones that I know of. Difficulty in completing a task can also affect the automated action. So for example, like Civilization 6,
Okay.
a very complicated game, very complex goals that you need to achieve. Whenever you gain a new resource tile, the game automatically puts your citizens however it decides that is best for just a nebulous point system. But sometimes the nebulous point system isn't what you want. Sometimes you really want to go into science victory, so you decide, you know what, I need to move all my citizens to over here to do this. So in my opinion, the best player intent designs are invisible. The player won't even notice. And honestly, Celeste does this amazingly. Like Celeste does, like Coyote time. The first time I played it, I didn't even notice that the Coyote time was a thing. The input buffering, so you could press the jump button, for example, right before you hit the ground, and the game will be like, okay, technically you're still midair, so you can jump, but you know what? I understand that you were just trying to jump, so once you hit the ground, we'll just make you jump. So that is a big one. Granted, Celeste does not have many mechanics. Its
Sure.
tight level designs really reduce the probability of different situations. And the goal is pretty simple. You just get to the end. So player intent in these types of games is much easier to work through. There is a conversation, of course, that if you are doing these accessibility options for the player, does that make the player a little bit, not the player, but make the game less competitive, so to speak, because you don't have these frame perfect inputs and all these things. It's not a like fighting games. You need to have like these frame perfect inputs. Like imagine in a fighting game like Street Fighter, where you have advanced defending tech, and the game designers say, you know what, if you press defend 10 frames before you get an attack, we understand that you were trying to do an advanced tech, so we're gonna advance tech for you. In competitive scene, people are gonna be like, no, like you need to be more competitive. But that is a whole nother conversation for
Sure.
another day. I've already gone way too into this.
No, it's
So
I think it's really interesting because the idea of player intent in terms of design, especially in a game as technical as Celeste, in a game that is your only interaction with the game is through technical placement of the player character on these precision platforms. The idea of player intent both driving the design forward is really interesting to me because it's not something that I would have really even picked out as something that has some impact or has I guess I'm saying that word a lot, but something that has a lot of value in the way the story itself is designed, because I think a lot of what's going on in Celeste is, and this is the spoiler free section, you're okay, I promise we'll let you know when we get there, but the idea that the story is in many ways metafictively recreating what's going on in the game, or vice versa. The way you play the game is starting to recreate the story, right? You're climbing a mountain with precision platforming techniques, and there's some leeway, there's some give where we have some coyote time, and we have some really tight wall climbing and dashing, and just some really smart, I'll call it quality of life design features that are based around this idea of player intention rather than player technical skill. I think that is going to add quite a bit to our conversation when we get into the overall story and probably slide into the spoiler section a little bit. So I thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah, definitely. I think this is a game that we're going to get really into it a little bit later about the creator, one of the creators, Maddy Thorson, and how essentially every single aspect of designing Celeste was very much an intentional approach of hers towards designing this game that were also reflective of her own personal experiences at the time.
Yeah.
But before we get there, really quickly gonna hit you with the Steam stats. You know how I love me some Steam stats. How long to beat has it at an average of 8.5 hours of playtime. So most people seem to play the normal game. The main story, 8.5 is how much I took to play the main story as well. Steam stats though has it at 58.8 hours of average playtime.
Wow.
So even though the average player, self-reported average player is 8.5, Steam stats, which is actually like using the Steam record and everything, it's 58 hours, which is crazy. Such a huge increase from one to the other. We will get into a little bit how, once we get into the spoiler section, why there is such a disparity between those. So there is also a quote that you actually shared with me, Jason.
Yes.
Thank you. I didn't know about this. Actually, how about you take it?
Sure. So Maddy famously said, I believe it was at a GDC, in regards to the making of Celeste, that if you make one thing feel incredible, the rest of the game will fall in place. And that's in reference to Madeline's platforming in Celeste, in that the platforming feels unbelievable. It feels super tight. It feels clean. And if you die, if you make a mistake in the game, it's because of your input. The game is doing everything in its power to get you over that finish line and make sure that you complete the task as it's laid out for you. And so it's one that's just like a really good feeling game to play, because it takes into account, I think, a lot of platformers that came before it and what makes something like a precision platformer feel really good. And it interprets those in a way that is both logical, I think, to the average player, and then also creates a little bit of flexibility in terms of you kind of have to solve each screen more or less the same way, but there is some expressiveness in terms of how exactly you approach it, and there's a little bit of creativity involved in that. It's not the most open-ended, but it's also, it's not like it's not there's one way to do it. It's not, Mario Maker or something like that.
Yeah. Funny that you should mention Mario Maker. That's gonna be making a return guest appearance.
Yes.
I think I totally agree with you that essentially every time you lose in this game, in the main story, it is definitely your I wouldn't say your fault. I don't think Maddy would use that language.
Okay, fair.
But definitely your attempt was not what was needed at the time, I guess, would be more like
it's
more.
It's probably more fair to say it's not that it was your fault. It's just that you get to try again. That the main impetus, the underlying philosophy of Celeste is you get to try again, you get to try again, you get to try again. No matter how many times you have failed, you can take that as an opportunity to learn and try again and achieve and do better. I will say, as much as I got frustrated, I never felt like except on the B-sides. I never felt like, oh my god, this is like, this is impossible. I can't do this. This is unfair. It felt like this is really difficult, and I cannot get this.
That is what I wanted to get to. I agree with this, with the very much with the Maddy Thorson designed levels, like the main levels. Once you hit the B sides, the C sides, I did hit a little bit more glitches or physics shenanigans where I couldn't 100% reproduce what it was asking me to reproduce, and that was frustrating, and I did feel at those times this is a little bit unfair.
Yeah.
But for the main story, definitely fair.
Absolutely. We'll get into a little bit of the history of the game as well before we dive into the story. Celeste was released on January 25th, 2018 on Linux, Mac OS, Nintendo Switch, PS4, and Windows. The initial concept was conceived earlier in 2015 by Maddy Thorson and Noel Berry, serving as director and lead programmer, respectively. And I think it's a good time to mention that a lot of what makes Celeste so special for a game is that it is a game that is very much about anxiety, and it is a game that is about depression. And so I'll leave this here as a bit of a content warning if that's not something that you want to listen to or hear right now, and particularly anxiety and depression surrounding gender transition. Then I thank you for listening, and we'll catch you next time. But if you are going to stay with us during the development of the game, Maddy Thorson did transition genders, and so some of that is sort of activating itself in the writing of Celeste.
At the same time, I do agree that this should have a content warning in case you are in a bad spot to have these topics be conversed. At the same time, even if you decide, hey, I need to leave because this isn't going to be helpful for me right now for my mental state, I will say that Celeste is a great game and approach for people who maybe don't have very deep mental issues right now. But if you are struggling with it, I would like to say that Celeste is not a game that has these topics and trivializes it in such a way where it's like trying to be gritty about the topics. Yes. And trying to have characters that suffer of these things suffer and give the player that feeling. It is a game about healing and about be a self-discovery. So even if you have to leave because this isn't your time right now to be listening to these things, I do want to put out there that Celeste is definitely a game worth considering as part of your journey, yes, just as much as it was part of Maddy Thorson's journey. Yeah. So if you need to head out, thank you for being here. I just wanted to leave that in there so that in case I didn't want the last thing you hear be, oh, Celeste is never going to be for me because it is about depression and therefore I cannot partake with this because I cannot engage with that right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Very well said, Fran. Thank you. So during the course of designing Celeste, Maddy Thorson was struggling with depression, anxiety, and in the process of discovering their queerness. And I believe, as I understand it, the game did not start from that position. The story did not start from that position. However, during the course of writing it, as is often the case, if you have ever created a piece of art or written a piece of art, we often find our own DNA on the page before too long if we're not careful. And so in the realist way that art is made, Thorson sort of found that it was themselves on the page, and Madeline started to look a lot like Maddy. And that leads into the development inexorably and to quite a bit of what the story is attempting to, I think, does achieve. And I think that's beautiful, and that's why Celeste is so important to so many people for many reasons. And the approach and the I would say that the approach to depression and anxiety here, is, as it developed into the writing and narrative of the story, is in many ways a little bit more general. So even if you don't have specific anxieties, depressions, or uh, thoughts right now, you know, concerning transition or queerness or gender, that this is not a game that is solely about that. It is about the experience of contending with anxiety and with depression, and something that probably more than a few gamers can relate to in this day and age. But I think that's important to note here. The team supported Maddy during the entire time, and they realized that the story would just be a much bigger part of Celeste than originally anticipated. I would say maybe traditionally these games aren't known for deep stories, and this is maybe one way that Celeste breaks from the norm. Uh, Notably, the team did not consult mental health professionals, as what was most important to them is that the narrative was personal. So rather than tackle mental wellness as a whole, they wanted to approach it from a, I would say, individualistic responsibility, from the position and perspective of, this is not a healing tool, this is not medicine, this is a story about a journey. And I think that's really beautiful in its own way. Maddy also made sure not to trivialize this any sort of mental illness, and that the ending of, and I guess if this might be a spoiler, but the ending of this climb will not heal Madeline. This is not the point. The point of this is not Madeline climbs to the top of Celeste Mountain and is magically cured of any sort of inexorable, existential malign or depression or anxiety. So Maddy, I would like to quote here from Maddy's acceptance speech at the Game Awards. If Celeste has helped you come to terms with mental illness, I just want to say that you deserve credit for that. That change came from inside of you, and you're capable of a lot more. And that's great. Like that is so real and very much what the experience of Celeste should be. And I think in a day and age where games and gaming get so focused on multiplayer experience, on competitiveness, on, in many ways, even in single player experiences, on beating the game, on beating the PC, we sometimes fail to recognize that you did achieve it, that we did achieve these things, and however we got it, however many attempts it took, that doesn't make us less or more necessarily because you got the highest DPS score in Overwatch 2, or you beat Elden Ring on fewer deaths than anyone in the world. But the fact that you achieved it at all, I think that's a beautiful thing to note here. And I think a lot of the design choices that the team made in Celeste underpin that quite a bit.
Yeah, that quote really gives me chills.
Yeah.
I think that's probably one of the best, except this is part of a much longer acceptance speech that she gave at the awards, but mostly everything else was thanking people. You could tell that she was not the most extroverted, wanting to be up there and talking to people, but you could tell that this was something that she really wanted to communicate because it was very near and dear to her. At this point, she had not finished transitioning, so this was something that she was still tackling with and still going through, and she was still figuring out. So to have some, I think that is very important as we talk about designers, and we like to talk a lot about the creators of these games and these podcasts episodes, and having somebody that the queer community can look up to is as a designer is so important, especially given that the industry as a whole skews so male centric and
Yeah.
white. So
Representation
it's weird.
matters. Full stop.
It's so weird to feel proud of somebody who you don't even
Yeah.
you've never even met. But I'm so proud of her, I guess.
Yeah.
Is what I would like to end this at.
Yeah. I think that's great.
So moving on to a little bit less heavy topic, let's talk about the cultural impact of Celeste. So Celeste was nominated for over 30 awards. It won at least 9 of them. A lot of them were music. Music is so good. I believe the name.
Lena Raine.
Lena Raine. So very, very much deserving. More Steam stats for you. 20.8 million gross revenue over 1.6 million units sold. Reviewers noted how Thorson's Super Mario Maker levels seem to inspire or serve as prototypes of some Celeste levels. And this seems like a good spot for me to go a little bit on a quick side tangent about development tools.
Take it away.
Development tools have come such a long way. I think that accessibility to these types of tools is so important. Growing up in Puerto Rico, at least at the time that I was there weren't really programming courses. We barely had any technical courses as a whole. I remember having to purchase Final Cut Express from Circuit City at one point.
Circuit City name drop?
Circuit City name drop, bro.
Whoa.
Sponsor us, long dead companies. We should act like we're being sponsored by long dead companies.
That's actually hilarious. Did you ever hear about the Circuit total tangent? Did you ever hear about the Circuit City method for getting jobs?
No, what was it?
After Circuit City closed, a bunch of people started putting their friends down as references and saying that they were managers in higher positions at Circuit City because nobody could replicate it because the entire company went under and folded.
Oh my!
So if you
that's genius.
If you're looking to get a job and you're struggling to get 25 years of experience for that entry level position, consider Circuit City. Anyway, back to you, Fran.
So I purchased Final Cut Express because at the time there was no. This is in video editing, not game development. But at the time it was either you use a Windows Movie Maker or you dish out thousands of dollars for Premiere or Final Cut. Final Cut Express was almost the only thing of its kind. It was still $150. I do remember that.
Oh my god!
So it was still a chunk of change, but so there wasn't much accessibility there. This isn't the case anymore, though, which I am ecstatic. I know that there are certain generational people that as they get older, they kind of are like, oh, I suffered, so younger generations should suffer. They should go through the same suffering that I did, which is I have no idea. Like, younger generations are learning how to programming sooner than ever. Honestly, I do expect that there will be programmers and game developers that surpass my technical skill faster than I do, just because they started earlier, so they just have more experience, and that is a great thing. I don't think that devalues me as a person. I still have experience and intuition. I think it's a great thing, having these multiple engines for free use, and a lot of emphasis from games using user-generated content, such as Mario Maker, for example.
Isn't it interesting to think that we are getting closer and closer to something like programming and coding being just like a baseline skill that large parts of just like a world populace they just know? It's just like a form of writing or a type of math that this just becomes something almost like a watershed moment in human history.
I honestly think this is just opinions. I need to ask teacher friends. If you are a professional teacher, please comment down below. Comment in our Discord. I would like to know, like, is programming course just as beneficial, if not more beneficial, than learning a second or third language? And by beneficial, obviously, I don't mean there is never such a thing as objectively better than other things. Like different paths and different people wanting different lives will find different things more useful than others. But I do feel like programming does have a bit of an edge in that it can easily kind of dig into separate places in your life, even if you never use programming. For example, it is a very good logic teaching tool. So even if you wanted to go into philosophy and learn, okay, how do I build an argument? How do I build my assumptions and my ifs and thens and all these very Greek inspired philosophical debating styles? Programming can really help with that, because programming at the end of the day is all yes or no and the implications of those bits. So that's one example of an indirect benefit of things such as programming. And I do think that the earlier we teach kids how to program, the better. I also think that it's going to be very important for whether or not the future generations can detect what is real and what isn't real, especially in the growing AI era. But this is a talk about Celeste, so let's go back. Let's go back to Earth.
Yeah, we'll bring it back to development tools. Thank you for indulging me on that little trip.
Of course, we will. That's for the post show. Before, if you wanted to play around with design with minimal programming, mods would be the only way to go. Shout out to Doom Wads, which were like the big mods of back in the day. A lot of people got started with Doom Wads. People that went on to work on Half-Life, being hired by Valve, id Software, Halo games. They started designing Doom mods, essentially Doom levels.
It's awesome.
And these things have slowly just become more and more accessible. Now you have Halo Forge. You could have designed your own levels, and now currently apparently the newest Halo Forges have their own programming language to make their own game modes. Super Mario Maker, like in Celeste. Roblox is an amazing tool for learning how to program and playing around. Most recently, I know that a lot of people are poo-pooing the fact that Epic Games is pushing Unreal Editor for Fortnite. Have you heard of this?
I have not.
So there is a version of Unreal that already comes pre-modded with all the Fortnite assets, all the Fortnite mechanics and technical stuff, but it still gives you a layer for you to create and develop and program your own games within Fortnite. So now you can prototype a whole third-person shooter within Fortnite and just already have out of the box this multiplayer experience. And I know that a lot of people like meme on Fortnite, but it's sick. It's amazing.
That's so sick.
It's really cool. You can download it now. It's free. So you can just start making like not even Fortnite mods, but you can start making your own games and publishing into the Fortnite marketplace. Now, don't get it twisted. I don't want to give Roblox and Epic to their horn too much. Their monetization scheme is incredibly predatory, but that is a separate conversation. These tools still exist to lower the barrier of entry, and I am not going to stand here and gatekeep what real development is.
Right.
At the end of the day, if you're learning what design is, if you're learning these philosophies, I think that it is very good. This is a topic that is very just education in engineering and programming and just game development as a whole is something very important to me. I've given classes on these types of things. So if you have any questions about getting your feet wet in game design, if you are asking, there's so many game engines, which one should I go with, or anything like that, I'm available to you at the Discord. Hit me up. I'll talk to you about the pros and cons of all the engines, or at least the ones I know of, and you can just get started, honestly, for free.
That's awesome. And that's a great resource. So just one more reason to join our Discord.
I didn't have here bolded in red, plug the Discord. No, I didn't.
Now it's real. So if you're here, if you're listening and you haven't joined our Discord, why do you hate us? No, I think that's a really interesting note, especially kind of digging back into how Maddie Thorson's Super Mario Maker levels kind of tie into the development both of Celeste and then the B-sides and the C-sides. So it's not something that I really got into. I never played Mario Maker, but I remember watching videos of people playing like these crazy levels that were just awesome. And that was very much a moment of like, I can't believe people are this smart and they're this good at this thing. So thanks for taking the time to teach us a little bit about accessibility and development tools, because that's not something I would have ever really came across.
Yeah, that's why I'm here, you know?
Yeah, so we'll cover the story real quick, and then we're gonna break into spoilers. But overall, Celeste uses so what's going on in Celeste is the main character that you play as is Madeline, and she arrives at this place called Celeste Mountain, and she is, as you might imagine, trying to climb to the summit of Celeste Mountain. That is her main goal. She doesn't really have a reason for doing so, and over the course of climbing to the summit of this mountain, she will learn quite a bit about herself and about the mountain and a few of the people that she meets along the way. And what really stands out to me, and I kind of hinted at this earlier, is that the way that the gameplay, and I've talked about this before, this is something that's really important to me, is that video games give you this opportunity to tell a story metafictively that you don't really get in other scenarios. In a movie, okay, Deadpool's coming out soon, right? So there's a new Deadpool coming out this year. Deadpool loves to break the fourth wall and speak directly to the viewer and talk to the audience. This is metafictive at its metafiction at its core, at its simplest, maybe. However, something like what a video game does is it gives you the opportunity to have the gameplay experience that every player will have, or many players will have, directly mirror the story that you're telling. So in this way, you have a story that is being told via actions that a player is taking, and the actions that the player are taking is directly mirroring, foiling, or reacting to that story. And there is like a very strict spoiler based metafictive moment where the boundaries of what makes this a self-contained story and game start to break away, and I'll talk about that after our next segment. But for the most part, some of the grueling I was gonna say grueling combat. I have
It sometimes feels like you're fighting the mountain.
it does, it definitely can. I think some of the precision platforming, some of these levels, these screens, particularly when when a save point is 2 screens long, where anytime you die in Celeste, you immediately respawn back at the beginning of the screen so you can try again. And this is something that's really critical to a precision platformer. But there's a couple times where you respawn a screen and a half or 2 screens back, usually towards the middle and later half of the game, that really throws you for a loop. But this sort of super challenging platforming in actively getting through each screen is such a direct mirror to Madeline's journey climbing the mountain. And it's just beautiful. Like, it's just so simple and it's so beautifully done. And I'm harping on it because they say that simplicity is elegant, and I think Celeste is just such an elegant game. The story is beautiful and heart-wrenching and sweet and moving, and just the act of playing it puts you into that mind space of, if you're not somebody who is currently, struggling with anxiety or depression, or has maybe dealt with those recently or in any sort of memory that you have, just the act of playing Celeste can help you position yourself into Madeline's psyche, into the game itself, into the story that we're trying to tell through Madeline's experience. And I think that's just really beautiful. And it's this constant feeling, like we kind of dove into, of, whatever you're going through, you can get through it. However many attempts it takes for you to solve this screen, solve this level, get through this moment, you can do it. And the game is going to do everything in its power to help you achieve that, just short of doing it for you, which wouldn't be satisfying at all.
Yeah.
So
it's very much not a very plot heavy game. It's very much character stories.
It's very character driven.
And honestly, it's better that way.
Yeah.
I think a plot would have gotten in the way.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. It's so much a story about Madeline and her struggle, and how just taking on something difficult and seeing it through can really be a truly healing experience. I think it's really moving. It's really incredible. And I think something like Celeste is speaking from a history of precision platformers, and that history of precision platformers, I think it's fair to talk about it now. Yes, it comes from the Super Marios and the Raymans and the Sonics of years past, and the Super Mario Makers and the Hat in Times, like all these great, classic, incredible platformers. But I think it's, I think it would be ineffective of us as a podcast and as gamers to not mention Super Meat Boy, right? And I think
Oh, he said it.
I think
He said it.
I know. I said it. It's crazy. No, it's my original experience with this genre, this exact genre of a 16-bit precision platformer like this, was playing through Super Meat Boy in college. And if you haven't played Super Meat Boy, it is a precision platformer made by the same guy who made Binding of Isaac.
Mm-hmm.
And it is very aughts. It is very mid 2000s. The humor is very Newgrounds. The gameplay is unbelievably tight. The gameplay is I would say, funnily enough, Super Meat Boy walked so Celeste could run. Both of these games are masterclasses in making platforming feel incredible. And what makes them what puts them in conversation is this aspect of hyper precise and like good feeling platforming. But Super Meat Boy doesn't have a story. It has less of a story. It has less characters. It's cheesier in almost a bad way nowadays. It might be just camp enough to have circled all the way back around by now, but
I'm not gonna lie to you, this was one of my secret notes, Super Meat Boy, and I did some research and I played Super Meat Boy.
Oh, you dug it back out?
I dug it back out. I played it and I was like, okay, let's if we're gonna get into this, because my partner Lauren, she saw me play Celeste, and the first thing she said was, "Isn't this just like Super Meat Boy?"
Oh my god!
So even to a viewer with passing knowledge is like, isn't this just Super Meat Boy? And I really want to talk about that because completely agree. I want to talk a little bit more about the differences because they are so tight controls. Weirdly enough, Super Meat Boy has a even more basic moveset.
Yes.
So there's even less. There's only running, move, jump. And if you want to call wall jump a jump, but there's no climbing, there's no dashing.
You can't hold on to a surface.
You cannot. At the same time, so on the floor you're not slidey, but on walls you are. So you will, if you jump at an angle towards a wall, you will slide up that wall, and that kind of like mitigates the whole. You've hit the wall and you start sliding down. It'll kind of break physics that way.
Right, because meat's wet.
Because meat is wet. Which, by the way, in case the title isn't
enough,
obvious, isn't enough. Super Meat Boy is a platformer where a wad of meat named Meat Boy must save his kidnapped girlfriend from Dr. Fetus.
His girlfriend is Bandage Girl. The meat is it's like wet ground beef, basically.
Yes. I think that I wouldn't be surprised. I didn't go this deep. I wouldn't be surprised if they did it this way so that they can get away with having gore without having gore,
I'm
because every
positive.
time you die, like there's meat splatters all over the place, and it actually stays from death to death. So when you die in a level, it'll respawn you really quickly, just like Celeste. But where you died, it still has the blood splatter or the meat splatter that you had. I would say that Super Meat Boy has a faster respawn time. It felt like it felt
Interesting.
really quick than in Celeste. And just to give a battle of the bands, How Long to Beat has it at 9.5 hours for the main line, with 43.5 hours of 100% completion, 20.5 million gross revenue on Steam stats. Now, granted, you need to remember that this game came out on Xbox Live first, because it
Yes.
was an Xbox Live
I think
exclusive
that's
back when.
extremely important to note.
So that number way bigger. And I think that's something that I didn't write down that you made me realize. And I knew that I wanted to talk about Super Meat Boy, but I didn't know why. And I think I now understand why. And it's how each game approaches the feeling of failure, repetition, and fighting at it again.
Yeah.
The story of Celeste does such a good job at putting you at ease. The music in Super Meat Boy is much more metal, much more angry. The music in Celeste is much more poppy and much more upbeat and happy, and trying to get you like
It's
through.
pianos, it's synths, it's beautiful.
Yeah,
I
it's
would not call the
beautiful.
music in Super Meat Boy beautiful.
I would say some people would probably prefer the Super Meat
Yeah.
Boy music, just because it is definitely more metal and all that stuff. I am not experienced enough in that genre to know if it's anything special, or if it just pretty much was just a rip from oh
Yeah.
yeah, we just bought the rights to an online album. But the feeling and the story of Celeste makes it so that every time you lose in Celeste, you feel sad, and you feel like a little bit frustrated with yourself, but you feel like you can do it and you're gonna push at it. Super Meat Boy is more Souls like, in that when you lose in Super Meat Boy, you just feel angry and you just want to like
It's
just shout and scream and just get mad. And honestly, hey, neither of them are good or bad. Both of them are trying to do different things. I personally enjoy Celeste's themes more,
I agree.
and that feeling more. However, I have to say, you Celeste is definitely standing in the shoulder of giants, because I have a hard time seeing Celeste being the game it is if it wasn't a game like Super Meat Boy coming out. Like, maybe that's too much of a stretch, but I do feel that Super Meat Boy was a big enough success story. It was even in its own, not its own movie. It was sharing the spotlight in a movie itself, and it was such a big game that I think that is very important, because even the common passerby is going to compare them. So
Yeah.
I think that it is very important for us to draw the line. And I'm kind of happy that it happened here, because I was thinking of putting this in the spoiler section, but I'm happy to have it here.
Yeah, I agree. I think especially uh for for people in our generation, millennial 90s kid, I'm 33 for what it's worth. Like, I played Super Meat Boy on my Xbox 360 in undergraduate, and I don't think I actually ever beat it until grad school, when I had my Xbox like planted in my friend's living room that I used to always hang out in, and like it would just be like six of us like drinking beers on like a, I don't know, like a Tuesday night, like college kids did, playing like Super Meat Boy as like a pregame, and like that was just like it was just a complete, like, I just don't see doing that with Celeste. Like, Celeste is a game that is, the story is so intrinsic to what is the team is trying to do, And like you said, yeah, I think they're absolutely standing on Edmund Spencer. I feel like that's his last name, but I might be wrong. I'll have to look this up and add it later. But dear listener, Edmund Spencer is an English poet best known for the Fairy Queen, an epic poem and allegory celebrating the Tudor dynasty, who died in 1599. The creator of Super Meat Boy is Edmund Macmillan, so sorry for that one, but I thought you ought to know. Edmund's team on Super Meat Boy, he might have been a solo developer at that point, but
for Super Meat Boy, there were 2 developers. One was more on the design side, and one was more on the programming side. Made in Flash, by the way, which is bonkers to release
to show our age.
And it is very Flash, but rip Flash, but to show like how early aughts when I was replaying it, there were memes in there. Forever Alone as a meme appears in the game. Up. There is a scene of the original Pokemon fight scene.
Yeah.
There's that scene with Super Meat Boy as the Bulbasaur and Dr. Fetus as the Gengar. Like, it's so very Newgroundsy, which is I almost feel like Super Meat Boy needs to be in a museum.
Yeah, we can put we'll put Celeste where the Mona Lisa goes, and we'll put Super Meat Boy along the way to the Mona Lisa.
Behind it. Yeah, exactly, you know?
No.
Make sure that it's not lit, because that's the dark side.
But it is something that just comes up in my mind when I was playing Celeste. Is like this, like I've played a game like this before. What I will say is that in just the gameplay feel and the design feel of Celeste, I think, does more to make you feel unbelievably cool as a player. Like, I think there are more moments that are more concisely condensed where you are doing like a couple moments of movement to get through the segment, and you maybe realize as you're about to die, like what you're supposed to do, and then you execute on it, and you're like, I feel so smart. I feel so good. And like, this was like so tight. Like it both of the games are kind of pulling on the rhythm game of it all, where there's like aspects of a rhythm game behind it, because kind of at its core, that's what's happening here. And I think Celeste just takes that to the next level, and it really excites me to see what Maddy and her team are going to make next. And even if it's in this space, or even if it's not in the space, I mean. But it also really inspires me to think like, oh my god, what's the next game that's gonna come out that's inspired by Celeste, that's walking on Celeste's shoulders, standing on their shoulders.
Yeah, I definitely agree that Celeste has better. Yes, I did it. I finished it. Awesome. Super Meat Boy, it happens a lot where you finish it and it's like, whew, finally. Okay, next. At the same time, hitting that rhythm metaphor and things like that, the more simplistic artistic direction of Super Meat Boy feels a lot more conducive to what I would be calling like lineups and timings. In Super Meat Boy, I realized, if I press a jump from this point to this point, I'll make that jump. And you realizing that makes it so much easier to just skip the areas of the level that you've already mastered. In Celeste, there are some times where there isn't really a good lineup. You just need to feel it. You need to like run and be like, I need to jump close to the edge. And that's my lineup. And no, in this one, it's like, okay, the third block to the right, if I jump at that point in time, I'm going to get a massive time skip bonus, which is going to really help me reach the end. Because in Celeste, it happened a lot to me where the level is long, I get to the end, and I'm still dying at the very beginning.
Yeah.
Like I've passed it a few times, but it's still haven't found out how to master that first area, because it isn't as tight in the art direction, from an art direction perspective, of being able to call out that point, that space is where I want to be pressing A. And I wanted to call that out because that's something that I realized playing Super Meat Boy this time. that I was able to speed run, so to speak, certain areas because I was able to be like, I'm gonna close my eyes and go bink, 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 bink.
Right,
Okay, got it.
sure. I see
Uh,
that, and I think
so
that's
yeah.
really interesting as a call out as well, because there were a lot of moments where I too was like struggling to close out a screen, and I kept dying at the beginning of the screen, either because I wasn't as precise as I needed to be. Part of me interprets that as Celeste is a game that is just asking you to be generally more precise more often than Super Meat Boy, and I think that's a growth of design philosophies in this space of Super Meat Boy is operating in this position of we're going to make the beginning seem more difficult than it is. And then after your 100th attempt on this screen, on this level, you will understand it to a point where you can skip all the buzz saws, or you can just do this. I'm going to jump here and line all this up and be able to speed run the segment. And Celeste is a little bit more interested in we're going to stay precise the whole way through, and your own personal mastery of this is going to carry you through to the end, or give you something to work towards if you're trying to become, the foremost, frame perfect expert on this particular screen.
Well, I think we were. Do you want to talk more about Super Meat Boy?
I
Is this
I
Super
would
Meat
like to
Boy
leave
podcast
Super
now?
Meat Boy in
Me
2010,
too.
or wherever it was. I thank you for your I thank you for your service, Super Meat Boy. We were I thank God Celeste came out, because now I can say we're better for you. I don't know that I would say that previously. No, that's not true. I'm disparaging it for no good reason. But Super Meat Boy was great. Certainly,
Yeah, I don't have as much
I
animosity
don't have.
towards Super Meat Boy
It's all
still.
for show. You just gotta sometimes you gotta make a little zhuzh, a little jus to get the sauce going. But
Yeah. Celeste versus Super Meat Boy. Comment below
yeah,
which one is
join
better.
my Twitter poll, my X poll. Sorry, so I have to take us to the tangent. I saw some weird discourse on X or Twitter the other day, and somebody called it Xing instead of tweeting, and I wanted to delete every social media account I owned, full stop, once that happened. So I did notice that they had a blue check mark, which led me to promptly blocking them. So if this is too political for you folks, get out.
Get out of here, dude. Let's be honest. They left when they heard that this has a main like a trans
That's true.
creator. Like let's be
They
real.
weren't. You're not our intended audience anyway. So I want to just quickly wrap up some spoiler free stuff here, and say goodbye. And saying goodbye to Meat Boy is a good place to do that. But the way death is handled in Celeste, in a vacuum, in and of itself, I think is really beautifully done, because something that Celeste does that I think this is part of why it feels so much like Super Meat Boy, right? Which is that you are expected to repeat a level over and 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 over again until you complete it. You do not have lives. You do not have you have ample auto save points throughout like an overall level, and some within extremely long screen segments. And the expectation is that you will do it, and you will do it again until you get it. And in Super Meat Boy, you have this feeling of like, oh, thank God it's over. What fresh hell waits before me? And in Celeste, it's this expectation of, oh my God, I can't believe I did it. That was awesome. What could you possibly even think of next? What does the next zone have for a gimmick, for a new piece of the level? And the difference in the deaths and the way those deaths are treated when you're expected to just repeat a level ad infinitum until you complete it is that in Super Meat Boy, every death is recorded and laid out and replayed for you all at once you complete the level as sort of a treat. So you get to see all of your previous iterations just throwing themselves into 400 buzzsaws in the first frame of the level or whatever, and that's like very funny. Ha ha ha. I'm 18. And in Celeste, again, I'm disparaging Super Meat Boy, but bear with me. In Celeste, you get a death count at the absolute end of the level. So once you finish the segment, you finish the Temple of Mirrors, you finish the Forgotten City, whatever it is, and you get a total death count, and the explicit understanding and interpretation of that death count is not as like a bragging rights sort of thing, except to maybe anyone but yourself. It's to understand that it took me on average 240 deaths to complete a stage. So, on average, I did 240. If I got 230, I felt very good about myself. I was like, oh my God, I shaved 10 deaths off. Like, I really like started to like jive and figure this out. But it wasn't like, oh, I have to see how many deaths Fran had in the Temple of Mirrors. No, it was never about, measuring myself against anyone else. It was about seeing a number of attempts it took to get it right, and sort of reveling in the beauty of that experience of like, hey, it took me 240 times to get it, but I got it after 240 times. And I think that's like a really beautiful way to take something that is so easy to make edgy in the shadow of something like Super Meat Boy and make it a really beautiful moment of growth and maturity.
Yeah. Spoiler alert, I never died.
Okay.
All right. I'm a prodigy, what can I say?
Okay. Well, you can go back to the Elden Ring podcast then.
Elden Ring podcast where we sit on spiked chairs while recording because we want to make it more difficult.
We record with the mics off.
You need to hear us shouting from across the country. Yes. Okay. Well, let's hit it. Let's hit our spoiler-free verdicts before moving on.
Take it away. I've been talking, Fran.
To spoilers. So for me, spoiler-free verdicts, pretty straightforward. If you love platformers, what are you doing? Play it.
You probably already have.
Great.
That's why you're here.
You've already probably perhaps one of the best platformers ever created. I would say that personally, I am still more inclined to enjoy stuff like A Hat in Time. I just had such a fun experience with A Hat in Time that I do agree. I do think the Celeste is a better game, but I still love A Hat in Time. I still enjoy it more.
No one
has
ever disparaged A Hat in Time.
It's such a good game. I love A Hat in Time. If you're so on platformers, try it. It may be difficult, but it's a very rewarding experience, and the story might pull you through some rough patches. So I think it is definitely a try it, even if you're like, I'm not really a big platformer person. However, if you know you don't like platformers, skip it. While I think that the game is doable for all skill levels as you get better playing through the game, I don't think that I think that if you don't enjoy platformers, or even if you outright dislike platformers, you're not going to enjoy the training process, and therefore the story won't really help in that manner, because you'll just feel animosity towards the game and therefore not connect with the story, I feel like, as a result. So if you already know that you dislike platformers, like I have never played a platformer that I ever liked, then I would say probably skip it. This is not gonna make you love platformers.
I think that's fair. I'll say in maybe less words that Celeste is fantastic and you should play it even if you don't like platformers, because right now it's $5 on Steam. It's $5. I guarantee you, listener, you had a coffee this month that sucked, and it probably cost you $5. Maddy earned it. The game is normally $20 on Steam and on Switch. It's widely available. I would say if you like indie games, if you like pixel art, the game is beautiful. The game is important. The music is phenomenal. Just take a listen to the soundtrack on YouTube or something, and I think you'll be really impressed. But I think that Maddy Makes Games really just came out swinging with Celeste, and I think it is a game that if you are interested in video games, if you are interested in the medium, you will find people talking about this game for a very, very, very long time. and I think you owe it to yourself. The game is maybe 8 hours. I would say even if you're not crazy about platformers, I think you should try to eat your vegetables and check it out. I think you should do a little bit of your homework and check it out, even for a little bit, to kind of understand what's going on, because I think you'll find that this is not a Hat in Time. This is not Super Meat Boy. For as much as we compare the two, I think it's a beautiful, moving, touching experience. The story is wonderful, and overall, it's just like it's just a tight little experience. It's just like a tight little game where you're kind of very quickly soaked up and wrapped up in what it's trying to do, and it's very easy to get lost in it. So I cannot recommend it enough. It was such a great time playing it. I played it in basically 2 sittings. I played the first half of it on a plane, and I played the second half of it on my couch. And the game looks gorgeous. I cannot stress to you enough that if you like pixel art at all, it's beautiful. And yeah, I mean, it looks great on an OLED Switch too. Shout out OLED Switch. Like, you just do it. Just play it. I'm not like selling it, because it's just like, I just feel like it's that game where it's just, you just got to do it. But that is going to wrap our spoiler-free section. So if you are going to leave us to join, to come back later once you've played the game, thank you so much for being here. We are Use Your Items, a video game podcast on philosophy and design, and Fran and I are so thankful that you chose to join us for this hour and 20 minutes that we spent talking about the game so far, and we cannot wait to see you on Discord. And if you don't feel like joining us on Discord, but you want to support the show, Apple iTunes reviews are super helpful. Please leave a 5-star review, and Spotify reviews are super useful as well. So if you want to support the show and support us, please just leave us a positive review on your podcast app of choice, and we will catch you next time. Thank you so much.
And don't forget to use circuitcity.com/use your items for 25% on nothing, because that company does not exist.
Get your Switch from Circuit City, everybody. It's free. Now that only the real gamers are left, what'd you think of the first-person shooting segment of Celeste? That was maybe my favorite.
Yo, that place was crazy.
No, it's an interesting thought, considering that Maddy Makes Games is going through these different iterations of Celeste currently. Listener, if you're not familiar, I think it was last month, or maybe it was the very beginning of this month, they released an N64 demake. I don't know what to call it. Version of Celeste, and they kind of interpreted, what was it, the first level, right? I didn't play it. Yeah,
I didn't play it either, unfortunately. I chose Super Meat Boy.
Fair. I'll have to play it and report back. But they remade some of the original Celeste in basically like 64-bit graphics in 3 dimensions, which is just like a really cool way to kind of say, hey, we're still here, we're still thinking about this game and sort of how we can tell the story through different graphical mediums, through different design tools, through different development tools. And it's interesting because that's usually like a fan-driven sort of thing, to see remakes and demakes and stuff like that. I famously, or I guess I should say famously, there was a Bloodborne PS1 demake that came out a few years ago that was unbelievably cool.
And to give a little bit, we've been talking a lot about Matty Thorson, but let's also give a shout out to Noel Berry, the programmer on Celeste, and all these demakes, upmakes, whatever you want to call them. These games were made from scratch. They were, well, I don't know about the N64 version, but at least the Celeste was made from scratch the whole engine. Um,
Yeah.
so I just wanted to give out a quick shout out. We usually talk about Maddie Thorson because this is really her story, but Noel Berry is definitely the Ryan Lewis to Macklemore or the Sky Blue to Red
Yo,
Foo. You
a
know
Macklemore
the
reference in 2024?
it. Are we playing Super Meat Boy?
It's
Wait, what was this podcast
suddenly
about?
I'm just getting like I feel like I'm getting Facebook memories of when Thrift Store came out, and it's painful. No, I think you make a really good point that this was not a solo development. We probably have, or we certainly will talk about solo development games in the future. Fran is a solo developer on his own work right now, and Maddy Makes Games is was programmed by Maddy and Noel, mainly by Noel. Was the lead programmer, and Maddy was the director. But they were also supported by their team of artists and composers, and it just goes to show that it does really take it takes a village really to make this happen. And so, shout out to Maddie and Noel and Amora, Gabby, Pedro. You're listed, and Lena for composing for Celeste, because we wouldn't be here if it wasn't for y'all making this incredible game.
Yep. So what do you want to hit first, story or game design?
I guess we should talk. Let's kind of dig into the game design of it a little bit more. I think that'll lead us naturally into moments of story, and I might ask to interrupt you when some things strike me.
Okay, sure. So a huge game design intention for Maddie in this game was difficulty customization. She really wanted to make sure that the game was rewarding for the normal playthrough, but I'll give the player enough breathing room to make the game easier or more difficult. It takes about 8.5 hours on average to beat. The completionist takes around 37.5. That is a 340% increase. That just shows you how much of this game is in the underbelly of making customization. Like, if you make this game more difficult, if you need some more to scratch that itch, if you don't want this game to be over, it doesn't have to be over. But first, let's go a little bit quickly in what makes the game easier. There is an assist mode. The assist mode, I'm going to quote it straight from the game. It says, assist mode allows you to modify the game's rules to fit your specific needs. This includes options such as slowing this game speed, granting yourself invisibility or infinite stamina, and skipping chapters entirely. Celeste is intended to be a challenging and rewarding experience. If the default game proves inaccessible to you, we hope that you can still find that experience with assist mode. So, why did this happen? It was obvious that from the get-go, Maddie wanted to make a difficult game. That she really wanted to push the envelope and make it so that the struggles of climbing Mount Celeste is reflective of Madeline's experience, innermost experiences. However, this did come out shortly after Cuphead. And every time there's a game that is very, very difficult, the conversation about should games give players an easy mode, so to speak, should those exist in games? Because Cuphead, if you don't know, Cuphead is essentially a boss rush game in which you defeat a lot of increasingly difficult bosses. Being a boss aficionado as I am, I did beat Cuphead, and I love Cuphead. It has a really cool aesthetic. But it is very, very difficult. It is a very difficult game. It's a weird game where playing 2-player makes the game more difficult than 1-player without even changing the design. It's just so many more bullets are on screen that it just becomes much more difficult to dodge bullets, and then it's like, you know what, I need to play this alone. But I do want, and something that she at first was going to call it, she was going to call it cheat mode. The assist mode, the original name was cheat mode. But she felt that was too judgmental. She felt like, well, it kind of defeats the purpose if I make this be like the not real way of playing the game. And I wanted to ask you, does assist mode in Celeste undercut its
Absolutely not.
themes?
Under no circumstances. I'm like I almost had to mute myself from interrupting you during all that because I feel so strongly about accessibility in games, and it's taken me a long
Well,
time to come back around to it, but I would, just to answer your question without diatribing, I do not think that it undermines Celeste's overall story or themes.
I want to make it a bit more clear because you did use the word accessibility, and I wouldn't consider this accessibility. I would consider this assistability, which is making like it gets very blurred that people think that difficulty and accessibility are two spectrums of the same, but that's not, in my opinion, correct. I would put accessibility things that make the game more a level playing field for people who aren't either able-bodied or have certain conditions that would not allow them. They already are playing the game in hard mode. So accessibility allows giving more access to the game to people who have those. I do think that assist mode does definitely help with that, but for example, Celeste, well, actually, we need to Google this. Does Celeste have, for example, a colorblind mode?
No, there are
So
not.
while Jason looks, so
As of
that
two
would
years
be
ago.
something that I would call. Okay, that's something that I would call an accessibility feature. That is something that is they are already playing in hard mode because they cannot see certain enemies because they blend in. They are colorblind. Having those features, I think, hits accessibility. So, having said that, do you still feel strongly about it?
I do, and I'll come at it because I think that the idea of accessibility being something that is strictly limited to being physically or mentally able to even approach the game is maybe limiting to the overall idea. I think that if a game's difficulty is so I agree. Difficulty and accessibility are two different scales. They're two different spectrums. It's not difficult to accessible. Accessibility is, can I play this game or not? I do think that when we get into accessibility, though, and we talk about difficulty, something like, I don't know, Elden Ring doesn't have a pause menu. It does not have a strict hard pause menu. That is that is an inaccessible feature of this game that is intended to be extremely difficult by design, and it's not limiting those who are not able-bodied, because if I'm a father of a child of a baby and I have to put the game down to pick up the baby and then I get killed with 50,000 runes because I couldn't pause the game, that's a failure of the game's design to be accessible by a wider audience, which I think is only limiting, because I personally think that if I'm making a piece of art, it doesn't need to be the most accessible to somebody, but I don't want to physically limit people from, I don't want to create barriers to accessing it without, I'm trying not to over abuse this word, accessibility, and kind of ruin like the way it sounds, but I don't think so. I think that Maddy was absolutely intending for a difficult experience, but if turning on, I think if you're being true to the experience that the game is asking you for, which is, this is going to be a difficult precision based game, if turning on infinite stamina just makes it so that you can have a challenging experience, I don't think that has undermined the game. I think you still had a challenging experience, but you now made the game approachable as opposed to obtuse or difficult to get through. I see something as like maybe infinite stamina is closer to, I'll keep using Elden Ring because that's the example that's in my head, is like using Spirit Ash in Elden Ring, where a hardcore player might say this is this is easy mode. It's cheating. It's not how you're supposed to play. And the normal human being player that's not like a sweaty tryhard will say it's in the game. It's for me to use. And I think that something like this assist mode falls in that space of accessibility, as opposed, and I think by creating levers and knobs that you can twist and pull to change and develop that difficulty, I think is only a good thing for experiencing what Celeste has to give, because difficulty is also something that is highly subjective, right? Like, we can all say that Dark Souls 1 is a difficult game. It's a difficult game because you don't know how to play Dark Souls before it comes out, or if you didn't play Demon Souls. If you've played Bloodborne or Dark Souls 3, you will have an idea of how to play Dark Souls 1, and it may in some cases be easier because you have this experience. You know what the intended play style is, in the same way that if you don't know you can jump in Mario, in the original Super Mario, the game is very difficult. You're not going to be able to beat it because you don't know what you're supposed to do. So I think that it's a really nuanced topic, and I think it's something that I would love to have a way more in-depth conversation on. We can do more research on, but I think it's a really good thing to call out here, and I appreciate you bringing it up.
I would love to have that conversation, because not right now, we can get deeper into it, but to give my thoughts in it, I think this playthrough of Celeste has really helped me find myself. I'm still not 100% sold on yes or no on this question, to be honest. I am of the belief, but it did help me discover, like, that whole accessibility versus assistability difficulty really helped me understand a little bit of my stances in it, because I really do think that all games should strive to be as accessible as possible. There will be some things that you cannot. I don't 100% think that I'm convinced that all games should be assistable, that all games should have an easy mode. I think that just like how an artist sometimes wants to create a work of art, and in that work of art might not be agreeable with everyone, but they want to express themselves, we shouldn't be saying, no, you can't do this. Obviously, players should also be allowed to say, well, I don't want to deal with your product, then I'm just not going to buy it. You're just not going to make money then. I think that is the kind of the free market at play there.
I think
that I like the idea of this game providing an assist mode, but having the assist mode be turned on like at a moment's notice. And the best case scenario of assist mode is that the player plays around with different modes to see what is best for them. But I worry that in the end, what is going to happen for most people is that they turn on assist mode, they turn everything on because they just want to brush through the story. And if you do that, then you are going to miss the feelings that the story is trying to tell. So what I'm about to say next is I'm noticing a long, now becoming a tradition in these podcasts of Fran has 2020 vision and hindsight, and is asking more from the developers than they probably like. Game development is expensive. Like, I cannot expect them to do every, like, oh, it would have been better if, like, in Obra Dinn, spoilers if you haven't heard that, I said, oh, wouldn't it have been cool if they would have taken 3D photography to God. Like, of, like, actual sets and
wouldn't
stuff.
It be cool if they had $55 million during production?
Yeah.
Lucas Pope, the single developer.
So obviously this is now a tradition, but I do want to give some alternatives to assist mode that I feel help to the game, what the game assist mode is trying to do, without undercutting the whole oh, I just want to play this for the story, so I'm just gonna turn it on to go easy mode or something like that. There are some games where easy mode I do think should exist if the gameplay isn't really conducive to the narrative. Like Kingdom Hearts, yeah, play beginner mode. If you're there for the story, first of all, why? But second of all,
Ouch.
I'm okay. I'm okay with you going easy mode to experience the joy of Disney worlds. So the designs that I was gonna put forth. If you want to say something
it's
first,
just
though.
like, to me, the idea of putting on beginner mode in Kingdom Hearts so that you can see what the story is without being held back by an egregiously difficult PlayStation 2 game. Just to note,
Yes.
it is egregiously difficult, and they made it easier in the remake, but I digress. That, to me, is really not dissimilar at all from turning on some knobs. I personally don't anticipate a world in which somebody says, hey, I can't do what Celeste is asking me to do. I'm going to flip all of these things on, make it infinitely easier, and I'm just going to breeze through it. Or like you said, I'm going to breeze through the story. That's not it. They want the story. They don't want for them, overwhelmingly difficult platforming for them. And I think that's why I see this idea of difficulty now as this difficulty is a spectrum, of course, and it is entirely subjective, because I start asking myself, okay, if I gave my dad Celeste, my dad does not play video games that aren't with his index finger on his phone and are maybe like malware stealing his information. I don't know, Dad, if you're listening to this, please check out your apps. Like, please make sure they're verified. Like, I don't know, sometimes you're playing some weird stuff, but I digress. If I gave my dad Celeste to play and he's like, Jason, this is just too fucking hard. Like, I can't move these characters. I'm not used to using a controller like this. And I said, okay, well, what if I told you could do this, you could do that, you could tweak this, and then he got to play it. This is somebody who is able-bodied, able-minded. He just isn't used to playing video games, and the questions that Celeste is asking are naturally difficult questions that I guess a quote-unquote typical gamer would be even somewhat familiar with. And my dad has played video games, so like he's played like a lot of like Half-Life 2 and first-person shooters, but I think that something like assist mode, letting you breeze through some of the platforming, would allow you to actually experience the story of Celeste. And if that's what got you through it, I think that's more to the point of what Maddy is saying with the story of Celeste, is that sometimes it's okay to ask for help. Sometimes it's okay to look to other people or to other places for the tools and solutions you need. You don't have to get through this thing alone.
I'm not disagreeing with that, with assist mode as, or having some sort of assist mechanic to help out the player more. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is this specific assist mode, being able to turn it at a moment's notice and being able to, from the beginning, without even trying, just turning it on.
Okay.
I'm not 100% sold that being able to just turn on at a moment, like, if a game has a way for you to change the difficulty, I think that games that don't allow you to change the difficulty once you start playing it is kind of not a good.
I would agree with you.
Like, allow the players to change the difficulty, but I would also say have the player experience and try first to play the game as intended before getting these things in. Or this is where I'm going to get into designs that maybe were too expensive. What would it look like if, hey, there are over 300% increase of levels that exist? Instead of making that 300% increase of levels, what if the game dynamically chose the next level depending on how many deaths you had throughout the game? So that way there is some dynamic process of climbing, so that way the difficulty is just out of reach of like, oh wow, you really can't do like levels that are 100% spikes and no walls. So the next level, we're going to quietly add this little platform here, so that way it helps you, or something like that. Something that makes the player that still they have the feeling of it's just out of reach, just like how Maddie is Madeline is through the game. Something is just out of reach, and I will fail the level. Some mechanic like that, which would still be a way to assist the player if the player is not good at the game, to still get that experience of failure and success and being in struggle. Or even if you needed to have an assist mode that you can turn on at any time, how about the assist mode degrades over time? So you can turn on infinite stamina, but after 10 minutes, it goes to 80% stamina, then 50%. So it quietly tries to be like, I think you're getting the hang of it. These are the train. You know what? It's okay to have training wheels. It's okay to have some help. But at the end of the day, I would like you to try without them. Something that kind of is an assist mode in a way. Obviously, again, I don't like these. Don't get me wrong, listener. I'm not giving these ideas of, oh, I am such a better designer. I know better than Maddy. Ha ha ha. And like that is not. I could not make this game. Maddy is a way better platforming designer than I think I will ever be. But at the same time, it does start making my mind wander of how could there have been a better way than just a switch to turn on and the player just leaves on forever. Maybe I might be erroneous. Maybe the game is still very difficult even with assist mode on, but I have and I feel like I would like to have tried a version of the game in which it is more subtle in how it's assisting you rather than it just being a switch that you can turn on at the beginning of the game.
Okay, I didn't look at assist mode, but isn't assist mode like a series of options that you can turn on and off? So
Yeah, there's a bunch of different
and so
options.
you can tweak
but
those knobs and levers to create the experience that you want. Isn't that just like generally speaking a better experience? I don't know. I just don't see it as
better.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I
yeah, sure.
I just don't see making the game play more according to my skill level as a net bad thing for the overall experience, because I don't know. I see what you're saying. The game's intended to be challenging, so if you're not being challenged, are you getting what the authorial intent of the game was? So I totally understand that, in the same way that like not like a particularly deep or difficult to understand movie or novel doesn't need to have a spark notes for you on the side telling you how it's interpreted, in the same way that the story of Celeste itself, right? Like we haven't even talked about Theo at all. We haven't mentioned him once, and it's like there's a whole segment of the game where Theo gets trapped in the Temple of Mirrors and he gets imprisoned in this glass box, much like the phone that he's always taking selfies on, and he's always being watched by these these unnerving eyes, because his psyche has created this problem where he just feels like he needs to be seen. And it's like the game doesn't hold your hand at all to explain to you that it's like sometimes you need help from people and sometimes you have to help the people that need you, and we all go through these things. Like it doesn't have to, there's no assist mode for understanding the story of Celeste. So I absolutely understand what you're saying, and I don't know, to me it's just like it comes back to what she said, where it's like if the default game proves inaccessible to you, we hope that you can still find that experience with assist mode. Like I just worry that we're creating that by saying opposite, that we're creating this gamer that is like chasing, I don't know, achievements, or like just the end of the game to say that they beat the game, so they'll they'll ignore the intended experience, and I just worry that that's kind of like a not like, I don't know, like that. I guess I just couldn't imagine that reality. I don't know. Maybe I'm off base and I'm too strident in my feelings about assist mode.
Yeah, I think at the end of the end of the day, one of the things that you keep mentioning is that doesn't that make that a better experience? And I don't think that it's not that clean cut. There is no such thing as experience is such a personal
Yeah.
thing, right? Where I personally, I don't know if I want to start going down that path of which is a better experience, because it really, like, if assist mode is the better experience for you, hey, that's great. You have a much more fun time. Awesome. At the end of the day, it's entertainment. If you're just treating it as that and that's all you want and that's all you get, hey, that's more power to you. You have purchased this product and you should use this product as you see
Yeah.
fit. At the same time, there is some level of what the story is trying to tell and what is trying to be given to the player, and that is not always conducive to what some would consider a better experience, but some would. And I don't want to take that away from the developers or the authorial intent, is I guess what I'm trying to say. And I think that there is ways of making things more easy for the player without giving them full control of the game. At the end of the day, assist mode kind of came about. Well, obviously, we don't know. This is something that if I had Maddy here in front of me, I would ask her a little bit more. Like, was this more reactionary to Cuphead and you wanting to make sure that the game didn't have that same criticism, or was this you more figuring yourself out and this was kind of like the authorial intent? How much of this is coming from the heart, and how much of it was, I think that people are expecting this of me and therefore I should do this. And yeah, I don't think I'm going to land on either side of the argument strongly at the moment. I don't feel convinced enough that assist mode is a game that all games should have, or most games should have for that matter, nor am I thinking that games should be Souls-like hard for the sake of Souls-like hardness. Like, I don't like games being hard for the sake of being hard, just for the sake of being hard.
Yeah.
I guess is my I guess it's me taking the listener and you, Jason, along for a journey of self-discovery and me figuring this out and where I stand.
No, I think what you're getting toward and getting into is something that's very salient in game design and video games today, and this idea of accessibility is super important, because there's a lot of conflating these ideas of difficulty, accessibility, assistability. A lot of these, I don't want to stammer my way through this, because I guess this came as a little bit of a sidebar for me, but I find that this is a very relevant and important conversation. It's something we're going to come back to. And for me, I feel very stridently that if something becomes more accessible and it allows more people to see what it is and to appreciate it and interact with it, that is generically a quote unquote good thing. Morals be damned, and whatever that means. But that's kind of where I land on it. And I think it would be best if we save this for a more in-depth breakdown episode, where we can maybe bring on maybe a few different guests or a few different people to have this conversation with about the idea of accessibility and what it means. I know my partner spends a lot of time working on accessibility in the workplace and accessibility in in programming, in coding, in software design. and it's a very nuanced topic. It's something that's super relevant. So I appreciate you for bringing it to the show and bringing it here in Celeste, because I think it's in the conversation of what's going on.
I wanted to make it very clear, just so in case we've been flip-flopping between accessibility and accessibility. I am all for accessibility. Accessibility for me is 100% a not requirement, because obviously at the end of the day there are a lot of forces as something, but if you don't do accessibility should be the default. If you choose not to do accessibility, you better have a really good darn reason, and it's even then I think that you probably should do accessibility. Like, there are some topics, very dark human topics, that I am like, did you have to bring that human topic, that topic into your story? Like, could this story have been done? Like, I'm not gonna say which topics are. Your mind is already probably thinking of some of these topics. Did you really have to bring these topics to the table? Is this really your story to tell? The same way that's how I feel with accessibility. Why are you not being accessible? This should be the default. What I am a little bit more nebulous on is accessibility and difficulty.
Yeah, I think in a later episode, in a later conversation for us, we probably need to set definitions a little bit more strictly as well, because I think you're separating where I'm conflating, and that's leading to some of our disagreement here. But I think it's important, and I'm glad you brought it up. But that kind of leads me into this conversation of the story, and by way of segue with talking about Theo, what is so exciting to me about getting through the story and seeing what Celeste has to offer is the way in which it tells this story of depression and tells this story of anxiety and self-discovery and personal growth and achievement through the means of Madeline's personal experience, Madeline's inner demons, the part of her, Badeline, whatever you want to call her.
Yes, that's the name.
Yes, it is Badeline by rote, so don't get mad at us. But these characters and this character study of Madeline and her inner demons is so wonderfully done, because in the course of playing Celeste, the first character you meet besides the old woman, Granny, is Theo. So there's Granny, the old woman. She's important, but she's mostly just there for... I don't want to minimize her, but she is there as a character that's there for Madeline to vent to, but also as this kind of mirror of, like, this thing that you needed to know was right in front of you the whole time, and this is a character that's going to bring it out. I would say that Granny is probably a little bit more archetypal than Mr. Oshiro, Theo, or Badeline. But I want to focus a little bit on Theo here, because to me, Theo is such a beautiful and inspiring character, because throughout all this, Theo is another traveler who's on the mountain, and he kind of doesn't know why he's there, and he just likes taking pictures. He likes taking selfies and posting them to Instagram, and he's so excited to share that with Madeline, who's kind of like, what the fuck are you doing, dude? Like, you're being so weird. But at the same time, she needs somebody. She needs somebody there to talk to and to help her. And he shows up throughout the game in each level, and he's there to support and ground Madeline. And I think Theo is just such a beautiful and inspiring character, because he has multiple moments of taking Madeline's thoughts and helping her helping her settle them out and understand them and piece them together and understand what she's going through. And the two moments for Theo that really stand out to me as just like these super evocative, emotionally powerful moments are the moment on the gondola and the moment in right after the gondola in the Temple of Mirrors. So in about the middle of the game, you get through a segment and you and Theo come across they call it a gondola. I guess I think it's literally a gondola. I would call it a ski lift, but it's kind of in the middle. It's a big box that gets moved on a tram line across the mountain.
Can you write down a conversation for another day? We need to really
Gondola.
define the differences between a gondola and
Okay,
a
all
ski
right, I
lift.
will. Um, but on this gondola, they're talking. They're having they're having a conversation, and Madeline's very worried about the uh, engineering stability of this old cable line and this old gondola. And Theo's like, it's gonna be fine. Don't worry about it. You're stressing out. We'll be good. We're almost there. And then there's a part. Then the part of Madeline, the part of her that is fearful and angry and hateful and resentful and all the bad things, all of the anxiety and self-hatred that Madeline feels is manifested in this evil goth version of her, Madeline. And this evil goth version of her pulls out, separates from her, and starts moving and shaking the gondola, and is just absolutely terrifying her to the point in which she has a panic attack. And I think this is just like such a fundamentally important moment in the story because at this at the moment that happens, Theo steps in, he calms you down, and he teaches you a very real anxiety management tool of imagining a feather in front of you and it moves with your breaths and you want to keep it moving as evenly and steadily as possible. And this is a real thing. Like if you are suffering, I don't know that this will fix a panic attack the way it does for Madeline, but if you feel like you're spiraling, if you feel like you are out of control of your thoughts, your anxiety is taking control of you, and you take this practice of picturing and imagining a feather floating in front of you and it moves up and down as you breathe in and out, and you use that to regulate the flow of your breath by regulating the way that feather moves. I it it can be very helpful. And I think by incorporating that into the game where you have to hold the A button to breathe in and release it to breathe out, and create and taking this moment of reprieve from platforming to tell this story is so important. It's so moving because it gets to the crux of Celeste is a game that is so much about needing help. You just like Madeline needs help to get through what she has to get through to climb the mountain. This is not the the romantic ideal of the powerful individual asserting their dominance over their environment or their society to break down all the barriers in their way and achieve what they have to achieve. This is not the solo explorer climbing the mountain to plant the flag. This is a very real story about Madeline, who is struggling with depression and struggling with anxiety, and she needs help. She needs friends. She needs people that she can trust with her feelings and trust with her emotions along the way. And Theo is a character that is there for her, that is there to help her, that sees his sister in her and is able to really create this moment of retrospection for both the player and for Madeline in realizing that Theo's not just a side character. He's integral to the experience of anyone going through something that is difficult, anyone going through a mentally trying or an emotionally trying period. You do not have to do it alone. There are people there to help you. And if you just look around, if you reach out, there will be somebody there to help you along the way, because you cannot and should not try to do it alone. And I think that's just like such a beautiful message. And it's so purposefully and beautifully delivered in that moment.
Yeah, it reminds me of games like Journey. Not
Yeah.
to Is it a
No.
spoiler or not? Essentially, in Journey, whenever you finish the game really encourages you to replay the game as a guide, and this probably doesn't work as well anymore because the game isn't as popular. But when you originally came out, whenever you play the game in single player or even on with some online things, you sometimes see like a guide, some kind of scarf floating in the wind, guiding you, pushing you forward, helping you through the story. And you realize later that that's actually other players that
So
are
cool.
actually playing that game at that point in time, and they have just finished the game and they've decided, actually, I'm going to help somebody else to go through this journey. And yeah, and this game, Theo, God, Theo's such a cool character. Theo is like definite. Is the hot take? Is Theo the paragon of like positive male role model? Like he is such a like. He has his own problems in that like he has like obsessions and things that he's working through and everything, but he's just so mature
Yeah.
and so like willing to just listen to other people. He's not afraid of letting his emotions and talking and like all these things. Like Theo is definitely up there, I would say, as a good positive role model.
He's
Um,
incredible. Just in the way that he's written and the way that he does both have his own issues, which will lead us to the Temple of Mirrors, and the ways in which he still tries to remain positive despite having shit that he's going through. I personally, one of my favorite parts about any segment of the game where you get to be around Theo is that noise he makes when he like makes a joke. That brrr, I don't know how to do it. I'll just insert it here, but it's just like, oh my god, it's the just like the sound design on the I don't know, the animalese that they speak is so fun and so good, and it's yeah, I love Theo to death. He's such an important character for rounding out the story.
Speaking of sounds effects and everything, we need to know, Jason. The listeners are on the edge of their seat. Better laughter, Kefka or
Oh my
Granny?
god, dude. I was thinking about that nonstop. Like coming hot off the heels. Listen, we just finished playing Final Fantasy VI for our last episode. And in that game, if you're not familiar, the main villain Kefka, who is an actual factual clown, has a super iconic laugh that is just like, if you've ever played the game, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And if you played Celeste, the character Granny has a very iconic laugh. I gotta say, Kefka's is probably better, but Granny's is damn close.
Okay. I honestly have no opinion. I guess Kefka because it's just evil and Granny's is just a very deep, hearty
Yeah.
laugh. I guess I would have to go with Kefka, but honestly, it's so close.
Yeah.
It's like top. We need to figure out all the laughters. Top 10 laughters. Number 3, Titus from Final Fantasy X. Anyways, let's go back to Theo.
So the other part about Theo, the other interesting moment of Theo's story that I like to point out is in the Temple of Mirrors. Theo, in the oh, I'm sorry. I think the gondola happens after the Temple of Mirrors. Uh, I'm forgetting now. It's weird. I just played it too. Anyway, the point that I'm bringing up is that Madeline looks into a mirror, sees the reflection of herself, which is Madeline, the manifestation of her inner demons, and the mirror breaks, and the manifestation of her self hatred and anxiety and depression escapes and starts haunting her and troubling her throughout the game, throughout the story. And in the Temple of Mirrors, you are struggling with this as well, but the Temple of Mirrors is a particularly mystical spot on Celeste Mountain, and Theo attempts to take a mirror selfie in front of one of these big, huge mirrors in the Temple of Mirrors, and as a result, gets trapped in a mirror world. You end up having to save him. You travel through the mirror, and you find all of these strange creatures that are mostly, I think, eyeballs. And you find Theo in the center of like a maze-like puzzle where you have to go through different areas to unlock different doors and passageways so that you can get to Theo. And Theo is encased and trapped in this like giant crystal prison, I guess. He's aware, he's awake, you can talk to him, but he's trapped there and he's at the center of this temple, and all around him, all throughout the background and the environments that you're traversing through are these giant eyeballs that are staring at him. And it's very I think it's very clearly just playing out that Theo has this, this obsession with social media, with perception and being perceived and how he is seen. And as he starts to work through his problems, he notices that he has this this desire to be perceived as a certain way, to be seen as competent, to be seen as important and having his shit together, despite sort of having I don't want to say a silver spoon, but he goes on to say, like, my life is not difficult. Like people support me, people are there for me, they're understanding, they're patient, they're so patient with me, and I still don't know what the fuck I want to do. I'm still so lost. And it is this absolute moment of fucking realness that just strikes through, that I think just cuts through everything the story's doing, because everything that Celeste is doing up until this point is so important, because it is a very literal interpretation of somebody trying to deal with their inner demons. Your inner demons actually factually manifest themselves in another person that you can talk to and have conversations with, and will chase you and will try to hurt you in an attempt to protect you, because all of these feelings of anxiety and self-doubt and self-hatred that Madeline is experiencing, these are all defense mechanisms that she uses to try and keep herself safe. And then you have this moment where we don't get that whole breakdown for Theo, but what we do get is this realization that everybody has a fucking problem. Everybody has something that they're working through, even the people that don't necessarily have, I guess I'll say, a quote unquote reason to. They don't have some sort of impetus. They had a good life. They have people who support them. They have good siblings, they have good parents, they have people who are patient with them, and they still don't know what they're doing, and they're still lost. And that is so okay, because just by reaching out, by asking, by not making it so that it's something you have to go through yourself, you get to solve that problem. And Theo is very much the manifestation of that in Madeline, in the ways in which we all have things that we're working through. And so it's just like, it's just a really just a cornerstone moment in this story. I guess I almost want to call it the climax. I think in some ways it's one of the most pivotal moments in the story, because it allows the narrative to turn a corner and kind of reflect everything that's been happening without having to spell things out by pulling, her coping mechanisms out into a fresh character.
And what a good segue, right? Because the next chapter after the Mirror Temple is Reflection. And it is the one that she starts reflecting and starts realizing and starts not working through her problems, because it's always
right.
a journey, right? She's working through it the whole time. But more, I guess, consciously realizing that she is working through this, and she is getting not better, but understanding more and learning that. So I guess I can kind of agree with you that this is kind of like the turning point where now this is kind of like not the epilogue, but definitely the downturn a little bit of her, not emotional journey. I don't know how to put it into words. Like, this is definitely now her realizing, and now her putting a little bit more conscious thought into bettering herself, into loving herself, which then becomes, I guess, fast forwarding. I don't know if you wanted to talk a little bit more about Reflection or the summit.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think in that position, Madeline has this moment of reflection where she's like, oh my God, Madeline is a part of me. It's a part of me. I have to let it go. I have to leave it behind me. I have to grow stronger than it. And she has that moment of I guess we'll call it false epiphany, where she's like, I've figured it out. And she's like, almost has this really sweet moment with herself where she's like, I'm going to let you go, but it's okay because we're both be better off. And Madeline's like, no, That's not how this works. You don't get to leave me behind. I've everything I've done has been for us. I'm protecting you, and all of this, right, is the ways in which we develop these defense mechanisms and these self-protection mechanisms that are broken and aren't working because we're solving traumas that we have, and our brain is just chemically coded to just create solutions as quickly as possible. And so it's just like this beautiful moment of realization, like, yes, we feel like we've reached the summit, we got to the top, we figured it out, we solved the problem. You didn't figure anything out. Or maybe you did partially, but it's not the whole story, and it's only a part of your journey. It's only it's yeah, it's a really just like resonant moment in the ways in which a journey to heal and work through anxiety and to work through depression and self-doubt can go, because it can very realistically feel to anybody who's felt like this, like, oh, I figured it out. I'm doing X, Y, and Z as a defense mechanism or as a coping mechanism to deal with, Z, and I if I just let all of this go, and it's like, that's not how this works. You have to learn how to harness these parts of yourself to work with the life that you want, to create healing, to create honest, success, and that's just like something that I think Celeste does so well, because when Madeline does heal that part of herself and does release her battle line, her inner demons, and learns to accept them instead of release them, and comes to terms with them, and they are able to now traverse levels that they weren't able to traverse before by Battleline throwing her or by getting a second dash. It is such a palpable, real moment of player agency and power spiking, where Madeline actually factually figures out what she needs to do, and she goes after it, and she achieves it by realizing that she has to accept this part of herself, and the player gets that experience as well by being immediately rewarded with a second dash, which the entire time that you're playing the game, you're like, if I had one more dash, I could breeze through this.
Spoiler alert, you cannot dash through this even with two dashes. At least the summit. Obviously, earlier levels you could probably do it. And something, I guess, to add on to that, without let me know if I'm going a bit too far, but I am going to jump ahead to Farewell. Because Farewell is a DLC, like they released it years later. I don't remember exactly how much later they played it. And the plot of the Farewell is Granny, the old woman, passes away. And Madeline is not able to accept it. She doesn't go to the funeral, and she starts to spiral. And she sees the bird that always is with Granny. And she's like, that must be her. There must be a way to bring her back. She can't be dead. And the game is all about her going beyond and trying to resurrect Granny. And the big thing, the reason I want to talk about it now, you lose your second dash because Battleline is her realistic side of her, is her like more like cynical, more like all these things. And she tells her, no, she's gone. Like you need to realize that. I am sad too about it, but you need to realize. And Madeline is like, no, screw you, leave me alone. And she leaves you alone, and you're back to one dash. And so you play Farewell with a single dash for most of it. There is a part where I didn't finish it. I didn't finish Farewell because you learn halfway through Farewell that you actually have to collect all the hearts available throughout the whole game. In case you don't know this, hearts are either hidden things in levels or the reward you get from B-sides and C-sides. So you need to do 10 B-sides and C-sides to finish Farewell. And at that point, I was like, thank you, but no thanks. I am good. I'll just watch the cutscenes
Yeah.
on YouTube because that is way too much for you to ask of me. Um, but yeah, it was a very. I really liked how even years later, Maddie Thorson is able to still use these simple mechanics to tell a story. And it goes to show you that with a little bit of creativity, a little bit of like thinking, you can really take most simple systems and twist them to tell a thematic story. I really like it. And I feel like I don't want to take away too much from what you're talking
No,
about. I'm
it's
talking
great.
a little bit too engineering, too technical,
No, no,
too
no. It's
designy.
all
Like
it's
it's
all
very important
attached.
what you're talking about too.
I mean, it's absolutely
So
all connected, and like the idea that, uh, I think in some ways, if you were trying to tell the story of Celeste as a graphic novel before it was a video game, for instance, I don't think it would be as successful because
yeah,
having so much of this journey of depression and anxiety and be laid out to you in the terms of having a part of you that separates, that's tangible, that you can see and fear and feel and have it interact with your friends and the other people in your life, like that in some ways is maybe a little on the nose as far as writing goes, but in terms of having it, result in a physical power spike in a video game, have it be the boss that you're running from, is like is a very tangible way to tell a story, especially like I said earlier, like Celeste does this beautiful, the magic trick of Celeste is that the climb is difficult because it's difficult, right? Like the climb
yeah,
that Madeline has to make up the mountain is difficult because the game is difficult.
yeah.
Previous conversation
It
of
isn't
just of
like
with notwithstanding, but
yeah, it's definitely it is not a game in which plot or story is essentially just has an invisible wall and says no, you can't go here until you've hit these story beats. No, you can go there. You just need to beat the game. It's we're not stopping you if you're good enough. Just go through it, and you could go like keep on going. It's definitely a game in which yeah, the difficulty in the struggle of climbing is a core. The core struggle of the game mechanics is a core piece. And to I don't know if you're ready to wrap this in a bow, but to wrap it in a bow, that's what Super Meat Boy is missing. That's what makes Celeste, for me personally, such a better
yeah.
game than Super Meat Boy. The fact that it is using difficulty not for difficulty's sake, not to make you feel like a badass, but to actually be reflective of yourself and be realize that it's okay not to feel like a badass. It's okay to ask other people
The
for help.
strawberries are just there for fun, for an additional challenge, for
Yeah.
there to tell your friends that you did it, you got this far, but it's not. They
Mhm.
don't do anything else. They don't make the game easier or harder.
They do affect
Okay, all
something in the
right. They
game.
affect the strawberry pie. Yes,
The pie. Wait, it's all
it's
back
all
to
back to pie.
the behind the
Yes.
box. It's all about the
No,
pie.
I agree with what you're saying though, right? That so I'm like getting misty thinking about it, but it's just like the idea of using difficulty in a precision platformer to showcase and highlight a journey through learning to mitigate anxiety is such a far cry from using it. You called out Super Meat Boy as using difficulty to envelop your badassery, I guess. The flip side of of that coin of feeling badass is feeling completely inadequate. You have to go on this journey in a game like that from feeling inadequate to feeling like a badass or feeling super successful. I think Celeste never ever attempts to make you feel inadequate to play the game. I think Celeste is
Yeah.
constantly trying to show you you are more than adequate and we will get there together, whether through 200 or 500 or 1000 1,000 deaths, and we will get there together, and you did it. And like it is so celebratory of the player and it is so excited for you to just achieve what you achieve, and I it's just so beautifully done,
Yeah.
and it is so moving, and it it's a really great example of doing so fucking much with so absolute little, other than unbelievably tight, tough gameplay.
Yep. With the asterisk being that is, I 110% agree with you with the main story. Once you hit the B side and C side, that through line it gets a little bit weakened, but it's not meant to
Right.
be the part of the
That's
story. It's not meant to be. That is just a that's just desserts if you want
right. Yeah.
desserts. You
It's
know.
just it's that's just desserts. That's all it is. And I think it's really great that both can exist side by side as opposed to having to be separate games or something like that. I want to throw in there, I mentioned it earlier, and I'm trying to get better about this, about burying leads for something in the spoiler section that I forgot to get to, and then I never get to it. So I mentioned earlier moments of metafiction regarding Battleline, and I was reviewing some notes that Brian sent me earlier. So thank you again, Brian, for pointing this out. I don't want to forget it, but there's a moment where you confront Battleline, like I mentioned, and you tell her, I figured it all out. You need to be let go. You need to be released. I'm going to leave you behind. I don't need you anymore, and you don't need me anymore, and we'll be better off without each other. And Battleline, like I actually got physical chills. I was playing the game on the couch with my partner, and she's like, what's she was like watching TikToks on her phone. She's like, what's going on? Like, what changed in the game? Like, she like noticed just by listening to it. But Battleline breaks the frame. So in every conversation that happens in the game, there's like a text box, and then there's the character portrait. Battleline breaks out of the text box. She is like peeling out on top of the text box. Her hair is going crazy. She is absolutely enveloped in rage, absolutely incensed that you would leave her behind. And it's this very moment of metafictive play that Maddy uses in this very moment that I think it's just so powerful. It's so overwhelming, and again, this is the way that you can use metafiction to tell a more sophisticated, in-depth story, and the ways in which you can really only do it in a video game, where you can set these standards up throughout the game, and then in an instant you can break it, and you can say, this is something to pay attention to. This is something that is so important. And what here it's saying is that if you try to leave behind these coping mechanisms, these self-defense mechanisms, these feelings of anxiety and hatred and doubt and worry and fear, all you're going to do is make it worse. You're going to make it so much worse, because you have to in this journey, in Madeline's journey, she has to accept them and internalize it. She has to come across this threshold of self-actualization. I won't get too deep into all that and the idea of a self and a subject, but it's a moment of metafiction like that stands out to me as the ways in which video games can tell a story that is so unique to video games and is so important as an art form and as a media. And this is a reason, this is something to point to as like, we have to protect and preserve the stories that we've told as a species, as a people, throughout the 20th century and 21st century, because it's, it's very, very important, and the things that we can do are very important. And I do not want to go down a video game preservation rabbit hole, but I just wanted to point out that moment of Battleline breaking out of the text box is just awesome. It is just like it just feels real. Like it's resonant with the feelings of anxiety or depression. Like I've struggled with anxiety, I've struggled with depression, and it's this like the sense of I will take a bit of a discord a side note here. We were just talking before we started recording this podcast. And here's a real behind the scenes inside baseball moment for you, listener. We were just talking about how I was feeling a little overwhelmed by the podcast, and I was feeling in reality I was feeling a little inadequate, and I was feeling like I wasn't doing enough, and that I was overwhelmed, and maybe I don't want to do this, and this isn't, like I was feeling a lot of different feelings. And talking to my partner about it, she's like, well, like, here's some ideas and some options, but you should just talk to Fran, because you're doing it with him, and you'll feel a lot better when you're, because you're creating these scenarios in your head. And I'm stammering and stuttering through this because I'm like just going, because this is all feelings, not thoughts. But that's I don't know, like it's like very real. It felt like my inner dialogue was breaking out of its text box and saying, this is too much, you can't do this, you can't achieve this, this isn't this, you always give up, just give up. And so it's like this very real moment that Celeste manages to take an experience that I think is extremely universal and lay it out in just this absolutely elegant and simple way. And it's beautiful. I've been saying the game is beautiful and moving and evocative quite a bit this episode, and it's because I think that's what the game is about. Feelings. The game is 100% about your feelings. That's it. Like there's send the tweet. That's it. There's no other notes. There's no Professor Weiss with a thesis that's going to change your life. It's metafictive, and that's about as close as you'll get. It's about feelings, and it's about how it makes you feel.
Do you have anything that you'd like to share before the final verdict?
Tell your friends that you love them, because it's important, and it doesn't hurt anyone. Doesn't hurt anyone. That's what I have to say. I love you, man.
Well, with that, let's. Oh boy, 5-minute break. No, let's finish this. We're so close to the summit. We can do this. We just breathe. We can do this. So yeah, my final verdict is pretty much the same as the non-spoiler review. Only additional context is that this game is definitely the work of someone going through a hard time in their lives and using games as a form of expression. And in our highly capitalistic society, sometimes games lose that form of expression that it makes us very human and makes our works very artistic. And this is a very obviously artistic and expressive artwork. I think as a designer, Celeste is highly recommended. At the very least, as a case study on how disparate story themes and game mechanics can come together to achieve ludonarrative harmony. We hear a lot about ludonarrative dissonance. This is the opposite. This is
a really good point.
Harmony. And if the game doesn't feel like that to you, if it doesn't impact you like it didn't impact me 4 years ago, that's okay. We're all different. We're all going through a different journey. And that is fine.
Hell yeah, brother. My final verdict is, I think, plainly obvious at this point, listener. So the game's great. It's phenomenal. It hit me harder talking about it to Fran during this recording than it did playing it. I think that's just evidence of a great piece of art. So if you have the opportunity to check it out, just check it out. You don't need to hear from us. You've probably heard about it already. Do you have any final words for your listener, Fran?
Yeah, in the ranking of 1 to 10, how many items you can use in this game, I give Celeste a 2 out of 10. There are absolutely no items that you can use unless you call touching the diamonds to get your dash back using, and that is really stretching the term.
I'm gonna give it 10 out of 10 strawberries with wings, and that's because it's the only game I've ever played where you get to make the dialogue choices for both characters in a scene ever. I have never played a game where you get to where you get to decide in the conversation from both aspects of the people in the dialogue, and that's really cool. So shout out to Maddie Thorson for letting me choose Theo and Madeline's dialogue options in that discussion. So it's a great game. This has been Use Your Items. It's a video game podcast on design and philosophy. My name's Jason Weiss. You can find me on the internet around. I recommend my Substack, useyouritems.substack.com, or better yet, check us out on Discord. If you've enjoyed the show, you can support us by leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify or your podcasting app of choice. Or you can just support us by dropping into Discord and saying, hi, hey, this was really cool. Thanks for doing that. We'd love to see you there. Fran, where can they find you?
They can find me on twitch.tv, L_Fantastico. I have deleted some apps from my phone that were distracting me so that way I can go into social media more. Yeah, that's crazy, right? I'm the opposite. I need to practice getting addicted to social media.
Dangerous.
Because I am very bad. I'm very bad at keeping in touch with my friends. So I need to definitely practice on that. So you can find me on Threads, Fantastico, and Instagram. Same thing. But best of all, Discord. There we can have a discourse on accessibility of game development. Don't forget to use your items.